is on the practical application of the Gita. If I speak at this level, is that okay? Everyone can hear me, right?
Yes.
The important thing about the Gita is that it is considered by scholars, it is considered by philosophers, it is considered even by the layman. It is considered by people outside of the culture to be what we call a living scripture. A living scripture means that something is organic. It means that it can work. It also means that it actually is very applicable to our lives. So I want to spend a few minutes today looking at what is it about the Gita that actually makes it so applicable. And what is it about the Gita that you can actually take something which could be helpful for you in your everyday life. One thing we have to understand is the uniqueness of the Gita. The Gita is actually considered a discourse, and it's considered divine not because it's spoken in heaven, but it's considered divine because what it speaks about hasn't got to do with matter. It has to do with spirit. That's a very important point. It was spoken by Lord Krishna himself. And Krishna has a very special place in our sastras, which we will speak about in a while. Is something wrong? Okay. And it is considered a scripture that is revered as a true source of knowledge. In fact, many scholars, even outside the Hindu fold, agree that it is a source of great spiritual as well as practical knowledge. There is a very universal appeal to the scriptures, especially the Gita. It's considered by all scholars to be one of the greatest spiritual books written because it's very easy to understand. If you read the Gita, if you read a translation of it also, and if you're reading the right kind of Gita, I say the right kind of Gita because the Gita should be written in what we call a disciplic succession. There has to be an authority who can write the Gita. You and I may discuss the Gita, but we may not have the authority to impart the Gita. So when the Gita is given or presented or received in the right way, it actually describes what we call the signs of self-realization. In other words, it makes you understand who you are. And we understand today, and you have lived long enough in this world to understand, that you're not just this body. There is something else to you. Some people call it the soul, other people call it consciousness. But whichever way you want to look at it, it is something which is more than your material body. So the Gita speaks to this point from the very start of the Gita, which is what makes it very powerful. Many great scholars have actually read the Gita. Einstein, no introduction to Einstein is needed. Einstein said that when I read the Gita and reflect on how God created this universe, everything else seems so superfluous. Coming from someone as powerful as Einstein, that's something. Mahatma Gandhi, he spent a lot of his lifetime studying the Gita and trying to apply it. And he said something very beautiful. Mahatma Gandhi said that the Gita calls on humanity to dedicate body, mind, and soul to pure duty. That's a very important concept in the Gita. And not just for mental enjoyment, especially when our desires are random and our impulses are undisciplined. Aldous Huxley, also a famous thinker of our century, he said that the Gita is the most systematic statement of spiritual evolution. He also considered the value of the Gita enduring. And Ralph Waldo Emerson said that the Gita is like an empire. It's an empire of thought. And unknown to many people, the Gita speaks about a one powerful deity. Very often we have the mistaken concept in the Hindu culture. Many people believe that actually we are looking at different gods in Hinduism. But the Gita and many of our scriptures say that truth is one, but sages call it by many names. And the Gita explains this philosophy very beautifully. Where was the Gita spoken? This is the practical application of the Gita. The Gita was not spoken in a cave. It's not like Arjuna and Krishna decided, let's take a break from the battle We'll go find a quiet room like what we're doing now, and we will discuss the Gita. It's actually set on the battlefield. And you know what happens on a battlefield, right? Apart from people fighting with each other, it's really a very chaotic place. Very chaotic. And it was not spoken, before, many days before the battle started. It was spoken on the eve of the battle. Imagine the kind of mindset Arjuna would have had at that point of time. It tells us something very important. When we approach spiritual life, we cannot think that the day will come when we will be in a cave and everything is peaceful and the world is lovely, and then we will become spiritual. It doesn't happen that way. Spiritual life starts on the day you have problems, which means it should start just about now. Because I don't know anyone in this room who doesn't have a problem, whether they had it in the morning or they had it later in the day, or you'll have it after the class ends. But the problems will be there. So when we speak about the Gita and understand where it's spoken, it's very symbolic. It was spoken at a time of activity, not at a time when people had nothing else to do. That's why the first important lesson in the Gita is that we cannot wait for the day when the waves on the beach will finally stop, and then we will take a plunge into the ocean. The waves will never stop. And the Gita tells us that now is as good a time to take up serious thinking of what your life is as much as it is any other time. I don't know about you, but for me, when I started reading the Gita and I became interested in spiritual life, my parents were a little bit anxious. They were thinking that if he does that, he won't do well in his exams, things will become problematic. But in fact, the opposite was true. Reading the Gita when I was young equipped me with the right attitude to face all the difficulties of life. Because life is like a battlefield, whether you accept it or not. Who was the Gita spoken to? The Gita was spoken to Arjuna. And Arjuna was highly skilled. He was a professional and he was a warrior. He was not a sadhu. He was not a sage. He was not a yogi in the usual sense of the word. He was a householder. He was married. He was a father. He was a son. He was a warrior. He had many hats, just like all of you have many hats. You're not just students. Many of you are sons and daughters to parents. Some of you are probably now husbands and wives to husbands and wives. And some of you will be lecturers or students. We all have different hats. But the important thing was Arjuna had a duty on the battlefield. And Krishna alerted him that he had a duty. And his duty, whether he liked it or not, was to protect the poor, was to be chivalrous, to protect the innocent, to protect the weak, and to protect the righteous. That was his duty. And that's the second thing that the Gita tells us. You have to embrace the situation you are in now. Sometimes we wait for that wonderful day that will come, what we call the honeymoon period, when everything is good, and then we will become spiritual, and then we will be ready to do something. You will never have that day. You will never have that day. So the Gita is a very frank and very honest literature. It doesn't speak to you of a good time that is coming ahead. It speaks to you on what to do when you are in difficulty, which is what for me makes it very practical. Because when you speak to someone and tell them about afterlife, they will very often tell you, I don't know what will happen to me in the afterlife. But right now, I've got exams, I've got difficult lectures, I've got difficult lecturers, I've got difficult people in my life. You tell me what to do now. And the Gita speaks to the now. It doesn't speak to a future. And that's also very important. The other thing that's interesting about the Gita is that it's a conversation. It was not one person speaking and the other person not saying anything at all. In fact, the Gita starts by Arjuna saying that he doesn't want to fight. And Krishna is his good friend, his best friend in fact. And when Krishna decides, when Arjuna decides that he wants to see the battle, and he wants to see who is he fighting with. So on the eve of the battle, he tells Krishna, bring me to the center. You can see in the picture, he's there now. But he comes to the center of the battlefield. And he decides to see all the people who are on his side, and he wants to see everyone else who's on the other side, his so-called adversaries. The only problem here is the adversaries of Arjuna are all related to him. Because the Kuru dynasty were all cousins. At some point or another, everyone was related. And so he began to feel a sense of, why should I do this? After all, so many people here are related to me. Should I actually be doing these things? Is it right? And for the first whole chapter, Arjuna brings up very salient arguments on why he should not be performing his duties. And at the end of it, when his feelings of renouncing the war are settled and stated, Krishna challenges it. And Krishna tells him that there is a reason why you have to do your duty. Even if it's a difficult duty that you have to perform, there is a reason. And then the Gita begins. And whatever that Krishna brings up in each chapter, Arjuna actually asks him questions. And that's very important in spiritual life. The Gita tells us that in spiritual life, you must constantly make inquiries. We never encourage you to accept everything that we say wholesale. You are all students of the highest caliber. And it is in your nature to question, assess, ascertain, analyze, determine, and then you act on it. The Gita encourages you to do that. Because the Gita tells you that if you have a theory, the only way the theory is going to be understood is if you put it into practice. Until you try it out, you will never know whether it works or not. Sometimes people sit down and look at something and say, you know what, I know it'll never work. But you haven't tried. You haven't tried. So just like you go into a lab and you test the theory, in the field of life, you must test the theory. And the Gita challenges you to do that. Arjuna was told by Krishna to do that. So Arjuna was confused about what he should do. And at that point of time, he turned to Krishna, his friend. But he decided that now, though you may be my friend, I understand that you are also my guide. And you are the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So instruct me. This is a very beautiful point about a conversation. It tells us that God is not someone far away, and that everybody has the capacity to have a relationship with the Supreme. For those who are older, they can see Krishna as a little boy. Mother Yashoda, the parents of Krishna, did that. Arjuna saw Krishna as a friend because he was his contemporary. It was stated in the Mahabharata that Arjuna was such close friends with Krishna that if he saw a beautiful princess walking by, he would turn to Krishna and say, Krishna, what do you think of her? Something that we may do with our friends. He didn't feel any inhibitions because he saw Krishna as his friend. But in the Gita, it transformed. That relationship transformed. And he turned to Krishna. So there is always value to respectful conversations with each other. And the Gita encourages you. We never say that you must accept it. We tell you, test it. And then if it doesn't work for you, that's fine. Which brings us to another important point. The Gita and all our scriptures say that everyone has what we call the freedom to choose. This is what attracted me to the Gita in the first place. The fact that we all have a choice. Was anyone compelled to come here today? I hope not. I hope Bala didn't put a gun to anyone's head and say, you have to come, otherwise there will be consequences. No. He's too much of a gentleman to do that anyway, isn't he? But nobody comes for these things because you're forced to come. You come because you have a choice. You could have decided to just stay back at home or study or do whatever else, but you had a choice. And at the end of the Gita, when 700 verses, almost 700 verses are up, Krishna says something very interesting. He tells Arjuna that you please do one thing. And this is a beautiful verse in the Gita. Thus I've explained to you knowledge, still more confidential. Deliberate on this fully, and then do what you wish to do. So the Gita actually shows us that we all have the ability to discriminate, discern, and choose. No one is telling you that you have to do something, but we encourage you to test it. Even Krishna said that. Deliberate on it. Sometimes when you think about it long enough, you absorb something. Isn't it true? When your mind dispenses with something, the thought doesn't dwell long enough for you to contemplate on it. That's why the specific word used in the Gita is to deliberate. When you deliberate on something, it has two meanings. One is to think about it deeply. But another meaning to deliberate is to act on it with deliberate fashion. That means you do it with your own choice, with deliberation. And then Krishna tells Arjuna, because you are my dear friend, I am speaking to you my supreme instructions. Therefore, what does this tell us? The Gita is shared and spoken amongst near and dear. When you have a relationship with someone and you discuss spiritual life, that makes it so much more deeper. The Gita is a very personal scripture. It is not an impersonal scripture that tells you do your own things. It is a scripture that tells you to have a conversation. It's a scripture that tells you to meet people of like-mindedness. In the company of drunkards, if you drink mineral water, eventually you will also drink. In the company of saintly people, even if you have been drinking for a while, it's very possible for you to become saintly. That's the value of association. And that's what the Gita says. Krishna tells Arjuna, I have described all this to you because you are my dear friend. So we must have a platform for us to discuss these things. There must be love, there must be respect, and there must be confidence in each other. When that happens, then Krishna says, it is for your benefit. It is for your benefit. But one important word is here, which is the very important crux of the Gita, to hear. And that's what you're doing. Do you know that generally speaking, medical students will confirm this, that generally speaking, the sense of your hearing is probably one of the last senses to fail. I have doctor friends who tell me that, and they always tell me that you should speak to your loved ones as long as you can. In the hospice, for example, you are told by doctors there at the end of care life, they tell you, keep speaking to them, because even though they may have been drugged, they are put under sedation, they can still hear you. Every organ generally shuts down eventually, but the hearing potential is there till the last. And that's what the Gita speaks about, the power of hearing, right? So when you hear, and you hear with an open heart, then the Gita speaks to you. This is something very important. And what does the Gita speak about? The Gita speaks about the most practical thing that you and I are looking for. What is the aim of life? Isn't it? And you know what the Gita tells us? The Gita tells us that the aim of life is actually the same for everyone. I teach a course in ESSEC Business School. You know where ESSEC Business School is? It's next to INSEAD, right? So I teach the law components there, but I also teach a course known as Asian Culture and Society. And I teach Hinduism to all these overseas students from France and Germany. They come over here. And I teach them the same thing. And I always tell them that in the Gita, we say that the aim of life for everyone is actually the same. And they always look at me quizzically. Because the Gita tells us that everyone actually wants to be joyful, happy, satisfied, and peaceful. That's what we all want. I would be very, very worried if someone came up to me and said, my aim of life is to be depressed, unhappy, dissatisfied, and agitated. Right? I would be concerned. Because generally speaking, everyone is looking for this. The only difference is where we want to find it. Some of us find it in company, some of us find it in studies, some of us find it in marriage, some of us find it in children, some of us find it just in being alone. But we are all looking for this. Everyone's looking for this. And in the Gita, in this particular verse, Krishna points out a very important point. This knowledge is the king of education. In other words, when we speak about the Gita, we are receiving knowledge. And Krishna says in the Gita that if you not only receive this knowledge, but if you act on it, it will be joyfully performed. In other words, and this you will appreciate, there is a connection between knowledge and joy. There is a connection between ignorance and not being joyous. When you're ignorant of who you are, your identity is not understood, you can be lost in this world. But if you find your footing in this world, that knowledge gives you joy. So there is a connection between knowledge and joy. And the Gita speaks to it in 5 major topics. That's all the Gita speaks about. The Gita speaks about duty, which is dharma. The Gita speaks about who is God. The Gita speaks about who you and I are. The Gita speaks about what is the nature of this world. And the Gita speaks about karma. And finally, the Gita speaks about time. Now, in all of this, there is one underlying factor, and that is dharma. Sometimes people who read the Gita say that we are Hindus, but the word Hindu doesn't exist in any scripture, right? The word Hindu is a mispronunciation. It is pronounced actually from the word Sindhu, the river Sindhu. But actually, the main focus of the Gita is what we call Sanatana Dharma. It means eternal occupation. So the Gita tells us that all of us actually have a dharma. And dharma is not something abstract. Dharma actually means duty. Every one of you has a dharma. If you're in NUS, your dharma is to be the best student you can be. If you're teaching, your dharma is to be the best teacher you can be. If I have a court case tomorrow, my dharma is to be the best lawyer I can be. The dharma also means that you are teachers, fathers, sons, and we must be the best of what we can. So when we speak about religion, religion is actually not dharma. Because religion generally speaks about a particular dogma. I go to a temple, therefore I am something. But the Gita never tells us to go to a temple. The Gita tells us to change our lives. That's what the Gita says. Because we can go to the temple and do whatever we want and come out and not change our lives. I think in the younger generation, people get tired of people who go to temple all the time, and when they come out, they behave anything but spiritual. Isn't it? You get tired of it. Tired of it. Have you heard of the Church of Satan? Because if you've been in the US, you'll realize that the Church of Satan is there. It's the complete opposite of religion. The founder of the Church of Satan was known as Anton LaVey. Anton LaVey says in a book called the Satanic Bible that I used to go to church every morning on Sundays dutifully with my mother, and I would see all these men and women dutifully sitting in the church. In the evening, I would walk past places and I would see these same people doing activities that were considered sinful. And that's the day when I realized that God is dead. He said that because many of us become disillusioned when we talk about religion and we find that we are speaking something and we are acting something else. The Gita says that whatever you are today, right now, is what you should be in the four walls of the confines of your house. That is your dharma. And dharma is something so powerful that everybody actually has the capacity to have their own natures. This is very important. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita that each one of you has a foundational nature. You know, as a lawyer, I have to do a lot of negotiations and mediations. And I always tell clients before we start mediating that while we mediate on a subject matter which is important, or a product that we want to exchange between clients, the real important success for mediation is in understanding each other's natures. You all have different natures. At the moment, you're looking very, very peaceful and nice. I'm not saying you're not nice, but some of us have a temper. Some of us may be more impatient. Some of us may be different in nature. Some of us wake up on the wrong side of the bed every day. Some of us just have a negative outlook to life. Some of us have a very positive outlook to life. The faster you understand someone's nature, the faster you accept that everybody has a certain nature, the more easier it is to live in this world. In expectation, there will always be disappointment. But in acceptance, there will always be the ability to become peaceful. This is a very important thing, and this is what the Gita speaks about to Dharma. But while we all have different dharmas, the Gita tells us that we have one dharma, which is universal to all of us. And that is, we all have the ability to serve. It's only a question of who we are serving. The Gita speaks to service of God, who is the highest being. But the truth is, in this world, that we always render service to someone. In fact, if you think about it, one friend serves another friend. The mother serves the son, Hopefully the son will serve the mother. The wife serves the husband serves the wife. The politicians convince the public that they will serve them. Not sure if they do it. The shopkeepers serve the customer. The artisan serves the capitalist. Capitalist serves the family. Family serves the state. Service is a constant companion to you. We all have that mood of service. The only difference is that who are we serving? And so the crux of the Gita is, whatever activity that you do, spiritualize it. Whatever service that you do, spiritualize it. In the Gita, there are two very, very important verses. In the first verse of 10:8 of the Gita, Krishna says, I am the source of material and spiritual worlds. Everything comes from me. If everything comes from me, engage in my devotional service. Devotional service simply means that we perform service with devotion. That's all. Do you need a seminar on how to become devoted? Nobody needs that. Everyone knows how to be devoted to a cause. Everyone knows how to be sincere to something. And how do you render this devotional service to Krishna? Krishna says, whatever you do, whatever you eat, whatever you offer or give away, do it as an offering. So the only difference between a devotee and someone in this world who is trying to be a devotee is that the devotee is also serving, but the devotee is serving a higher purpose. Not in a proud sense, but knowing that there's a higher purpose to life. So we have now the PowerPoint. We're using it to describe something spiritual. It's a higher purpose. We use the mic, we use the harmonium. We could have sung any other songs on it, but we used it to sing the names of Krishna. We're spiritualizing our activities. When you study, study hard, but study as if you're offering it to Krishna. That is the success of the devotional service. So Krishna says that the devotees of the Lord are fully devoted and they constantly serve with love. So service is a very important aspect. And when you do that, Krishna reciprocates. He gives you the intelligence by which you can come to him. That's stated in the Gita. So intelligence, like it or not, is not only inherently in us. Intelligence is a gift. And that's useful for all of us because it keeps us on the ground, doesn't it? Otherwise, we keep thinking that I am the person who's very smart. Have you had blankouts when you're having exams? I really hope not. But if you do, you know it's a crazy thing to happen, isn't it? Have you been in situations where you've studied very hard, but the results is not what you wanted? Have you been in situations where you didn't study so hard, but the results were really not so bad? I've been in situations where I've really worked for a case, and the case goes against me. I've had occasions where I really couldn't find something good in the case. The judge finds something that I couldn't find. The lawyer on the other side couldn't find. And lo and behold, I just win the case. Results are never in our hands, but the effort is. So Krishna tells us that who we are is very important in the Gita. So you know who Krishna is, but knowing that we are not just this body is very important. There was a king who had 4 wives. His first wife was very, very beautiful, and wherever he went, he would bring her. The second wife was someone very reliable, and she was always his companion. The third wife was someone who was a confidant, would hear him through all his difficulties. The fourth wife was his well-wisher, but because she appeared very ordinary, he hardly noticed her. The story goes that when the king was about to die, he turned to his 4 wives and said, "Can one of you accompany me in death? At least one. I have 4, at least one." The first wife said, "I am still young and I'm beautiful. After you leave, I would continue living in this world and I want to continue with my beauty." The second wife said, "I have taken care of everything that you have, but I cannot go with you because you have the children and everything. I must stay on." The third wife said, "I've been your confidant, but I have to stay on because I have to take care of other people too." Only the fourth wife turned to the king and said, "I have been your well-wisher all this time, but you have ignored me for a long, long time. You have looked to everything else. You have looked to everyone else. You have taken care of your body so well, but you have neglected to take care of me. The fourth wife is the soul. The third wife is the confidant, the close friend that we have, our family. The second wife is actually all our property. We want our properties to go with us, but when we leave, we don't take a single cent with us. When we came to this world, we had no bank account either. When we leave, your bank accounts will be there. But believe me, as a lawyer, I can tell you that they will never go with you. They will go with your loved ones, right? And the last wife, the first wife, is the beauty of this world. You want it for yourself, but beauty always escapes you. You can never hold on to it. It has a way of deteriorating. There was a time when I did have much more hair. There was a time when my hair was actually quite black. But there will come a time when it is all going to go. Nothing stays with us. So our problem, the Gita says, is that we clean the cage very beautifully, but we forget to feed the bird. The bird is the soul. It's our consciousness. Day in, day out, we pamper the body. But where is the food for the soul? What we are doing now is food for the soul. Chanting is food for the soul. Prayers are food for the soul. And that is why the Gita says that there is no satisfaction, no peace, no happiness if we forget who we are. Because when we forget who we are, we will look to all the objects around us. We will become attached to them. From that attachment will come lust because we want them. We want ownership of them. And then they will leave us because that's their nature. And we will become angry, we'll become frustrated, we'll become deluded, we'll become bewildered. And when that happens, we lose our intelligence. So the Gita, in a scientific way, tells us what happens when you hold on to something temporary. Eventually, this is what will happen. There is no peace, no happiness, no satisfaction, because it is going to leave you in any event. Which brings us to a very important point in the Gita, the nature of the material world. This is my favorite part. It gets a bit depressing, but bear with me for a few minutes. The Gita tells us that this world has a nature. Just like all of you have a nature, this world has a nature. This world is known as Dukhalayam, Ashashvatam. Dukhalayam means a place full of miseries, anxieties, and challenges. Ashashvatam gives you the reason for the miseries, temporary nature. Whatever that is temporary will not be with you. And therefore, when it leaves you, you will either be anxious, or you will cry, or you will be miserable. That is the nature of the world. And the problem in the world is, when we have a material problem, we look for material solutions, which is very natural. But when you take on the spirit of the Gita, you look for spiritual solutions in the material world. You understand, for example, that if you have a problem, you can try in various ways to resolve it materially. But until and unless you know who you are and what is your place in this world, it's just like jumping from one point to another, or like we say, from the frying pan to the fire. It's going to be the same problem in a different way. That's what will happen. Sometimes in this world, what happens to us is that we make so much effort for a single drop of honey. Have you seen how you work so hard to get a moment of happiness, but so much of difficulty you have to go through just for that moment? Many of you may be working or will continue to work, and you realize for 30 days they work you like a donkey. And if they don't work you like a donkey, you work yourself to that point. At the end of the day, you get a nice paycheck and you feel all my day has been worth it, all my month has been worth it. You give your paycheck to your wife, or you share it with her, or you take it out, and then all the bills come in. And by the time all the bills are paid off, you see what is balance, and you think, okay, next month should come very soon because I need that paycheck again. This is how the Gita tells us, for a single moment of happiness in this world, there is a disproportionate amount of effort, difficulty, and challenge. So if you're just going to look out for satisfaction of the body, it is going to be temporary. Satisfaction of the soul is what we need. And that's why the Gita says that without understanding spirit, it's really difficult to be happy in this world. There are miseries caused by others. Have you noticed how you're walking down the road, nothing happens, you're being a good boy, good girl, and suddenly someone comes into your life and causes you havoc. It happens. I do family law, by the way, and I do a lot of, I handle a lot of divorces. And when couples come and see me and say they want to divorce from each other, I ask them why. After all, you fell in love with each other. And they say, my life was going perfectly until he came into it. Sometimes everything is good, and somebody comes and all of a sudden you have misery. Sometimes you have misery caused by forces of nature. You're looking at it today. Earthquakes, volcanoes, eruptions, tsunamis. Try being in the middle of one. You're helpless. In Singapore, they tell you there's no earthquake. We are earthquake free. So I grew up in Singapore thinking I'll never experience an earthquake. But I went to Gujarat in 2000 or 2001. There was the great earthquake then. Hundreds and thousands of people died. I was in an open field and the ground cracked, literally. We were having a groundbreaking ceremony for a new temple and the ground literally broke, right? It wasn't a groundbreaking, it was a groundbreaking, as in really breaking. And I thought that I was actually, I was feeling, I thought I was faint because I saw buildings moving, I saw cracks appearing, and then I saw everybody had the same look. And that's when I realized, my God, I'm in the middle of an earthquake. And I can tell you for that short moment, I was helpless. Misery is caused by forces of nature. And the last misery, the Gita says, is the worst one. Misery caused by yourself to yourself. Self-inflicted. Don't we do that to ourselves all the time? I look at someone who's a good friend, he doesn't smile at me today. I start thinking, why is he not smiling? Why isn't he nice to me today? For the whole day I'm disturbed. He may be thinking of some problems, but you never bother to check with him. You are in anxiety, he's in anxiety. This is misery caused by yourself. How many times you put yourself in a position where you regret? Very often, it's the reason for why you are in difficulty. The other thing the Gita tells us is that we all have 4 defects we have to accept. And because we don't accept it, we are always expecting something. Everyone makes mistakes. We want everyone to be forgiving of us when we make mistakes. But when others make mistakes, we are very unforgiving. All of us have some level of illusionment because we don't realize who we are. We all have a natural tendency to cheat, the Gita says. Interesting, huh? It explains that if you could make 10 cents out of someone, you probably do it. If you could find a way not to work hard, you probably do it. The tendency is there. And last but not least, we're all limited by imperfect senses. I off all the lights and it becomes pitch dark and you really can't see much. And the final reason why it's difficult to be happy in this world is because of the 4 stations of life. Everyone is born. Everyone must fall sick. Most of us will grow old and all of us will die. And it's not easy. Ask anyone who is giving birth, right? My wife was giving birth and I remember she had the epidural and everything. And when I kept telling her, don't worry, everything will be fine, she gave me that look that said, I think you better stop now. It's not easy. Disease, when you are sick, it's never easy. Old age, ask people who are getting old. They will tell you walking up the stairs is like climbing the Himalayas. It's very difficult. And death is going to be difficult. We will get to know it soon. So it's very hard to be happy in this world without understanding the purpose to life. And that's why the Gita says, work by understanding your nature and nurture yourself. This is the important thing. Nurture your qualities towards Krishna, but understand your nature. We all work according to our nature. The last topic of Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita is time. I like this magazine, right? It came out many years ago, Time I Am. And time is Krishna. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita 11th chapter, Time I am, destroyer of the world. And I've come to engage all people. That's the nature of time. The nature of time is that it engages you. You realize that? When someone says, hey, don't waste time, it doesn't mean you're not doing anything. You're engaged actually in doing nothing. But you're still engaged. And Krishna says this on the battlefield because he says, according to time, those who must die will die. And according to time, those who are living must live. Everything deteriorates on the canvas of time. Birth, death, old age, disease. play out on the canvas of time. And you know what? What is lost in time can never be regained. You could regain something else in this world, but you can never regain time. Now I just spoke, time is gone. Now I just spoke, time is gone. Now I said something again, time is gone. This is the nature of time. Which means what we do with time becomes very important. And that's why duty, work and activity is so practical in the Gita. When I read the Gita and I realized, this is amazing. I can be a student in a school and still live with the Gita. Because Krishna says in the Gita that if you perform your duty without attachment to it, but you offer some of the results to the higher being, to the Lord, then you are not affected by the sin of that result. Otherwise, you will always get good karma and bad karma. Some people say my life should be full of good karma. But good karma only means that you have more credit on your balance sheet. You still have to come back. And when you come back, the chances of you incurring debit, logically, is always going to be there. Better not to come back to the credit-debit situation. Close your accounts. That's the whole point. So Krishna tells Arjuna, develop a visionary perspective to work. Work. Results are very important. I'm not telling everyone to stop thinking about results. No. But remember, your effort is what is within your control. When I was primary 1, I got 99% in my final exam. Very good. The only unfortunate thing was I was second in class. Number 1 had 100%. I remember it was my good friend until that day. I was very upset. But when I went home, my mother was upset with me. She told me 99%, you should have been first. You should have got 100%. I said, look, 99 is good. And she said that I saw how you studied. You didn't put in hard work. You were probably lucky or maybe just smart. But you can't rely on that. Now, my mother was a teacher in the same school. Never have a mother who's a teacher in the same school as you. It's a disaster. You don't have a life. So I went to sleep very, very sad. In the night, my father came to see me. In my house, my mother is health minister, finance minister, defense minister, and prime minister. My father is president, right? So if you know the Singapore context, you'll understand why he came after my mother. My father came and told me this very interesting thing. He said, Siva, I'm very happy with how you work. We're very happy with your result. But we know you could have put in better hard work. So when we say you should do better than 99%, it's not the result we're looking at. We know that your effort was lacking. Then I asked him a very important question. How will I know I put in enough effort? And he told me something cryptic at that point of time. Touch your heart and you will know. Years later, I think what he meant was, everyone has a conscience. You will know if you have done your best. And you can walk away from something knowing that you have done your best. That is the science of work. The result is not in your hands, but effort is definitely there. And that is why when we work in that way, we are peaceful. Arjuna was told by Krishna, don't worry about the result of the battle. You work for my satisfaction. What comes from the result is up to me. The knife in the hand of a surgeon can heal. The knife in the hand of a thief can hurt. But knife remains the knife. Nobody is going to sue a knife. They will only sue the surgeon or they will catch the thief. Become an instrument. That's what Krishna told Arjuna. And that's what he's telling us in the Gita. Become an instrument in his hands and you will become peaceful. An instrument doesn't attract karma. Instrument is just instrument. And that is the beauty of living such a life. So to conclude, the verdict of the Gita is very nicely stated in this verse. If you are not connected with Krishna, if you're not connected with the Supreme, if you're not connected with knowing who you are in relation to your Creator, then two things will happen. You will not have transcendental intelligence. Intelligence which is material, everybody has. We all have an IQ. But the ability to become spiritually intelligent requires humility. And you will not be able to have a steady mind because there's no connection. When we chant Krishna's names like we did just now, When you chant the names of God, whether you're Muslim, Christian, Buddhist, doesn't matter what faith you come from. But when you chant transcendental vibrations, the effect of it is you get a connection with the Supreme. And if you don't have that connection, the Gita says there's no possibility of peace. And how can there be any happiness without peace? So this is a very good verse for us to conclude with. That the Gita talks about something very practical, something we all want, peace. But to get peace, you must get happiness. To get happiness, you must have peace. An unsteady mind will never bring you peace. You'll be like a deer, chanchal. You'll be moving from point to point to point. But if you are anchored in spirit, then you will realize in time that you become peaceful. The Gita ends by telling you that when you take up spiritual life, it doesn't mean all the problems of the world will go. Doesn't mean you won't die, you won't be sick. Doesn't mean you won't have problems. But the Gita guarantees one thing. You will face the problems with great strength, great intelligence, and you will face it with ability. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much. Are there any questions, comments, violent objections? Sometimes when no one says anything, either it means you've accepted everything I've said, or it could be, let's get this over with. Yes.
How to control the mind? Like, because it's sometimes very flickering.
Yes. Actually, it's not sometimes.
Or every time.
The mind is always flickering. Flickering. I ask you all for 1 minute not to think of pink elephants. Everyone would have thought about pink elephants. It'll happen. That's the nature of the mind. The Gita says you can control the mind through two things. Knowledge and practice. What is that knowledge point? Knowledge is to understand that the mind is material in nature. And that what the mind tells you is very often speculative. You have to use the mind's neighbor, intelligence, to control the mind. Intelligence is not the mind. We always think intelligence is the mind. But intelligence is that faculty in your mind, in your body, in your brain or your subtle body that gives you the ability to control your mind. In other words, if you're in difficulty and the mind says, let's do something drastic, your intelligence should prevail and say, wait a minute, this is not according to the Gita, why should I do it? That's one way of doing it. But if your intelligence is also misguided, then the best way to control your mind and control your intelligence is to practice devotional service. If you practice chanting, for example, for thousands of years in all traditions, chanting calms the mind. It really does calm the mind because it's a spiritual vibration. Mantra, man means mind, tra means to rest. Mantra is a place where mantra means a vibration on which the mind can find rest. So that's how it's done. Practice, detachment, intelligence, and devotion. Any other questions? Yes?
First of all, thanks a lot. Wonderful lecture, as always.
Thank you, and it's good to see you after a long time.
Maybe, yeah, you're right. Yeah. I would like to ask about Sthita Prajna. It's a very fundamental concept for human beings to do activities, but with a kind of detachment.
Yes.
Yeah. So
The word Sthita Prajna, right? So nicely you brought it up, comes in the second chapter, right? Arjuna asks Krishna a very important question. What is a sign of someone who is Sthita Prajna? One who is detached but equipoised. One who is calm in the midst of difficulties. How does he speak? How does he act? What does he say? How does he sit? How does he walk? So Arjuna is asking very practical things about Sthita Prajna. Sthita Prajna, at the basis of Sthita Prajna, is the understanding and conviction that this world is temporary by nature. That is the starting point. And when you build on the fact that if it's temporary, attachment to that which is temporary will bring happiness and sadness which is temporary. Very logical, very logical. Therefore, attach yourself to something which is permanent. And understand that anything that happens to you in this world is meant to happen as an arrangement and not an accident. A Sthita Prajna person is a person who sees the universe as a university. He sees and she sees that I can learn from everything Krishna gives me in this world. If something is very difficult, I find a way to learn from it. If something is very nice, I also find a way to learn from it. So good things, bad things, they're just different sides of the same coin. This is a Sthita Prajna person. That's the fastest way I can explain that to you. Thank you. Yes?
If everything is predetermined by Krishna, then where does our free will come in?
First point, Krishna never says everything is predetermined. So it's a good thing that you brought up. Krishna says that this world is continuing by my energy and by my arrangement. However, all of us have the freedom of choice. We have the freedom to turn to Krishna or to turn away from Krishna, because that is the essence of devotion. So therefore, all of us have the freedom to make decisions and know that they are not predetermined. We have previous karmas, definitely. That's why we are here, that's why we are in certain families, that's previous. But we have the right now to make a decision what to do with that karma. Now, right now, you could decide, I'm going to walk out of the room. It's your decision. Someone can argumentatively, intellectually argue, but that could have been predetermined. You wouldn't know. Yes, you wouldn't know, but you made a choice. It's very hard to predetermine a choice. A choice could come up just within the next 2 seconds. It's not predetermined. It is yours. So Krishna says that he has an arrangement for everyone. He has a plan for everyone, but you have a choice. The simplest way to explain that is like parents. All parents have dreams for their children. I have an arrangement, a plan for you. I want you to study till here. I want you to get married there. But finally, it's your choice. That's the easiest way to understand this world. Is that all right?
But if he has the plan, doesn't that show that it is like written beforehand?
He has a plan which is written. But have you heard of flexi plans? Even Singtel has a flexi plan for your phone. Right? So it is an assumption that plans are cast in stone. They're not. Krishna is alive. He doesn't have to make a plan and keep to it. As you grow in devotional service, he changes his plan for you. He reciprocates with you. If he decides that you are moving away from him, his plan will change. He's dynamic. He's dynamic. So remember, predetermination, arrangement, Krishna is not bound by them. If Krishna was bound by them, plans would be Krishna. Plans would be greater than Krishna. The laws of karma would be greater than Krishna. Fate would be greater than Krishna. Krishna always has what in law is called discretion. I have the discretion to pull the plug. I have the discretion to remove something or to give you something. That's the beauty of Krishna. Is that helpful?
Yes.
Yeah, very, very good. I like this question. Prabhu, I think that's all we have time for. I have taken so much more time. I apologize. It's just that when I speak about these things, there's so much to speak about. Actually, I'm not even finished with my slides, but I decided I better stop here before I overstayed my welcome. If you want these slides for yourselves, let me know. I'm happy to share them with you. Right? There's no proprietary interest to you, and I won't charge you for licensing. This knowledge must be freely available to everyone. Take it back with you. Read it. If you find it's useful, use it. If you find that you have the capacity to discuss this with friends or in a venue, do it. Right? So that's the best I can do. Thank you for your time, and I hope I will see you again at some point of time. That is not predetermined. That will depend on whether you want to. You have a choice. We can always meet again. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for coming. And one of our friends has something to give away.
I'm not sure if any of y'all have
it's good that you brought that up, because I have 12 Bhagavad Gitas behind. And these are going to be gifts to everyone who's here. I know there are more than 12 of you. I didn't expect so many of you. But please, thank you very much for bringing the gifts. And the Gitas are also available. Please take them. Please read them. They're very handy. And the versions of the Gita make a difference. If you read a version of the Gita, right, which is very philosophical and misses the point of devotion, then you miss it by a mile. So remember, the Gita must be purely presented. Present it as it is. Don't present it with a motive. Thank you very much. What do we do now, Rajari?
So we can move to the canteen for some food.
Sure.
So all of you can join us.
Thank you. Let's have some food and
That's
prasadam,
why we-
and I hope to see all of you.